Okay, so another day, another video. I'm joined today by Jay Smith of Unfair Sports. We have to break down week one matchup as Oklahoma takes on UTEP. And Jay, we thought last year was an anticipated season opener for the Oklahoma Sooners. I mean, I'll let you speak to it. You're the Oklahoma fan. But before you speak on that, let the people know where they can find you. But then I want to hear about what the temperature is in Oklahoma for this season's opener.
So you can find me. My YouTube channel is Unfair Sports. Just search for us. That's where all of our OU content is. And then we have a podcast where we talk just other sports and everything else, fantasy, and it's Unfair Sports as well. Just search it wherever podcasts are downloaded, listen to. Find me on Twitter at Unfair Sports. That's where the show content is. I have my personal as well through the scroller, but most of my sports takes are usually on the sports channel. And weather-wise, man, it's been rainy the last day, but it's supposed to be beautiful. We're looking at about a 90 high in here in Oklahoma, 69 low, and it's going to be a day game. So it's going to be about 3:30 kickoff. That means it's going to be scorching. It's going to be probably at about the 89, 90 range. It's going to be beautiful, sunny, and Oklahoma fans are going to be excited about seeing this new era of Oklahoma football. This is our third coach since 1999. That's crazy.
That's just absurd.
That's absurd.
Y'all are almost the Steelers of college football in that aspect, where you get a coach and that coach isn't going anywhere. And I don't want to derail too far off the conversation, but the point does need to be made. One of the reasons why I was always so surprised by the Lincoln Riley move wasn't that a college coach went to another college to coach at. We
Right.
see that all the time, right? Like that doesn't surprise me. We don't see coaches leave a job like OU for a USC, or even in Notre Dame's case. We don't see coaches just leave Notre Dame, right? Like there's these institutions where you just don't see that happen. That was part of the intrigue, but the flip side of that intrigue is there is now so much hype about this season opener. What are you most excited about seeing week one out of your Oklahoma Sooners?
Honestly, the one thing that I'm excited to see is what the defense is going to look like. So we all know that since what's that 2013 when Venables decided to leave and Mike Stoops was the main guy at Oklahoma, we haven't actually seen a real defense since Venables actually left. Now, at that time, it's kind of funny because when Stoops came back, it was around the time people were kind of trying to chase Brent Venables out, which I don't understand why. I mean, he was getting players like Tommy Harris to come to Oklahoma. Why would you want him to leave? And the defense was doing enough, but it's like the offense, it's like they were never in sync. It was either you had a really good defense and an okay offense, or you had a great offense and the defense was okay. And now bringing him back after especially all these years we've had these bad defenses, 2017 was the year that Oklahoma was supposed to win the national championship. I know you as an Alabama fan, you would probably beg to differ, but at the same time, that Georgia game being up 31-14 at the half at the Rose Bowl, I'm sitting in the stands next to Georgia fans and they're quiet. Like it was just complete. You could drop a pin and hear it in that stadium. They were so quiet because of the dominance of Oklahoma, and the defense couldn't hold up. The coach decided that he didn't want to put his foot on the gas. You have the Heisman Trophy winner, and you don't want to put your foot on the gas against Georgia. Neither here nor there. But besides that, that was the year. And if there was a competent defensive scheme set up that year, Oklahoma would have definitely given Alabama some problems, especially since they had to change quarterbacks at the half in order to win it. That was the chance. And of course, we didn't take advantage of it. And so for me, I want to see what this defense looks like. I want to see what Venables brings out there. I want to see the intensity from these players. We've got a new strength coach. Schmitty's back. We're going to have those old, strong dudes from 2002, 2003, 2005 playing. I want to see what they look like in this setup, in this scheme that Venables is going to have, because Venables has a record of coaching guys up. He's coached 2 stars to 3 stars, 3 stars to 4 stars, 4 stars to borderline or even 5-star performers.
Absolutely.
We've seen people get drafted in the first round underneath him. Hell, he had 4 players at Clemson get drafted in the first round, and I promise you 2 of them with 3 stars. And it's like, how do you do that? Coaching. So seeing this whole regime come over, and then also kind of shutting up some of the national media. Everyone's there's a lot of people that are down on Oklahoma, and it's like, oh, well, they got a new coach. He's never coached before. it's a different world. And not to be too long on this, but this is one point I like to make when I talk about Venables coming into town. And I've mentioned this on my show a few times. He didn't just show up by himself and start piecemealing a staff. He brought everybody from Clemson with him. This is not your typical new coach coming into a new job. Usually they're picking them from other schools, friends they've worked with for years, maybe bring one assistant with them from their old school. No, he brought everybody. And so because of that, all that continuity, and we talked about it on your show before, that is critical to me helping them in being successful early. So
yeah,
I'm excited about the
absolutely.
defense.
So I want to hear, out of all the hires Brent Venables made, who was your favorite?
Javonte, not gonna lie,
Nice.
pulling him
Hey,
from you all,
absolutely.
bringing him from Alabama like that. Now the one thing about Valai was, and I know that a lot of Alabama fans weren't super high on him, but y'all still got some monsters in the secondary. But he also jumped around. You know, he was at Texas. He went to the Eagles for like a week. Then he went to Alabama, and then now he's at Oklahoma, and he's one of those guys that players just like. They like him. They really. A lot of players keep saying that's my guy. Every time I've seen a recruit talk about him, that's my guy. And it's just something about his ability to draw those young players in, those young men in, and they just adore him. That to me was probably my favorite hire, outside of course, all the Clemson people he brought with him. But I really liked that. When I really dug into it, I'm like, man, a lot of players like him. And I love it when you get a coach that can bring in recruits because they like their recruiter and their coach.
Yeah. So for me, it was Todd Bates, right? Like,
Oh,
I think when I look at all the hires Oklahoma made, Brent Venables being able to bring in Todd Bates, I think, obviously outside the Venables hire, that to me was the best hire Oklahoma and Venables made. Todd Bates is one of the premier defensive line coaches in the nation. We know what he architected at Clemson. But not only that, he's got the experience. He played SEC football. Like, he's got ties to the South. He's got ties specifically to the SEC in Alabama. So for the move on the horizon, which given some news we heard about, we'll get into that here in a little bit, is only going to help you. That hire to me was a 10 out of a 10. One of the best position hires of the offseason to me. Like, I would rank the Todd Bates hire and the Travaris Robinson hire Alabama did to replace Jay Valai as, like, in my opinion, for position coaches, two best hires of the offseason. I mean, those are knocked out of the park 10s. But a name that Oklahoma fans give me consistently is a name you mentioned. And it's a name that, you know, the more I've had to look into him, the more research I've done, the more I think these Oklahoma fans in my comments are 100% right, and that's Schmitty. Talk to me about the excitement around Schmitty being back in Norman.
So, of course, for us, those that do know who Schmitty is, we're pumped. We're excited. We're going to bring back something that Oklahoma football was known for when Bob Stoops got there: physicality. Big, strong dudes just throwing people around. And that was the thing that we missed going into, honestly, all the way down to the Clemson playoff game. When Oklahoma played against them, I can't think of the year off the top of my head, but that was, you know, Baker Mayfield as well. In that game, Clemson basically just out-physicaled Oklahoma all the way up till the second half. So the first half, Oklahoma had the lead going into halftime, another lead. But as soon as that second half hit, you started to notice that Oklahoma line was exhausted. That defensive front, exhausted. Like, you can tell that they just weren't in shape, not in the shape that you're used to that you would expect out of Oklahoma from years past. I mean, hell, I still think about the 2003 national championship versus LSU. They won that award, and they realized that the only way to get past them was to make them spread out. They were like the Secret Service. You could not get past that offensive line. I think Jason White got sacked 4 times the entire season.
Yep,
Absurd.
that Joe Moore Award.
The Joe Moore Award, exactly. That's what it is. And so they, because of how physical they were, they could do that. And then going up in that Clemson game, the physicality was gone. And so bringing Schmitty in, you start to see conditioning. They work out hard. And players will tell you, going into the NFL, you tell them that you worked with Schmitty, you were Schmitty made. That's a mark of that's a good mark. We'll take him, because they know that Schmitty's going to not break you, but he's going to push you to that limit and make you realize that you can go a lot further than you thought, and you'll be better off later in the season. That was one thing I did notice about Oklahoma over the years underneath the Riley regime was they were playing themselves into shape. You can't do that, especially when you get in the SEC. I know that's a big staple of Nick Saban. You're not taking days off. Why? Other people are not. And because your opponents are not taking off, why should you take off? If you take off, we're going to lose. So in order to not do that, we're going to add an extra day when we can, just so that we make sure that you're in shape. And having someone like Schmitty, who's that type of dude, is huge for the future of the conditioning and the work behind Oklahoma. Injuries will probably start to drop in comparison because players are built physically to handle a lot of that stuff. And so for me, I was excited seeing his name pop back up because I remember hearing about him. I didn't know him intimately as a fan, but I heard his name and then seeing him come back. Oh yeah, because Texas A&M, they got a lot of good out of him the 4 years they had him.
Absolutely. And, we talked about some offensive line. Before we go over to offense, I do want to hit a few more areas on defense. But the reason why I bring up offensive line in relation to Schmitty is because when you look at A&M's offensive line the past few years, I mean, that's been a major benefactor of exactly what we're talking about here. And I think last year is a great example. You have Josh Henson there who inherits an offensive line with a lot of new faces last season. The offensive line he had the year prior was so veteran for Texas A&M. And when we fast forward a year, that Texas A&M offensive line, though inexperienced last season, they were a pretty darn good unit. They stood stout. That's kind of the physicality that we're talking about here. Now, before we make that jump, I want to hear first and foremost, specifically on the defense, where are you most keyed in on for this week 1 matchup? What position group are you watching the closest?
The Cheetah. So there's been a lot of talk around Deshaun White getting the starting nod, and a lot of people wondering why Justin Harrington didn't get it. And there's something to it. There's something to what Venables is doing. So that cheetah role he created, if I'm correct, it was at Clemson. And one of the best known cheetahs out there was Isaiah Simmons. Now, that dude was a specimen. So it's really hard to try to compare anybody to him. But if I'm correct, he was a 3-star recruit.
Yeah, he was not
a very touted recruit. No. He was not someone that everyone was going after, and he snatched him up out of Kansas, which Jaren Kanak came from, if I'm correct, Hayes, Kansas as well, which I'm very high on Kanak the mechanic. Yeah. But that role is something that Venables decided that I need the most athletic guy out there, and I'm going to just move you everywhere. I want you to blitz. I want you to go back into coverage. I want you to be good in the zone. It's one of those roles that I'm really interested to see if White is that guy and if everyone is validated by their concerns and wanting Harrington out there instead. Now, with that being said, I do believe it's going to be a rotation between those two a lot. And I think it's going to be based upon circumstances. I think in probably, let me see, looking at the size-wise, Harrington is 6'3", 215, while Deshaun White is 6', 222. I'm thinking in the run situation, White will be out there. In the pass situation, you'll see more Harrington. That's just my thought. But at the same time, I mean, like I said, there's a good chance we're going to see both of them playing in that role. And I'm really excited to see how that develops in this new OU defense.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, there's 2 areas on the defense I'm going to be very keyed in on. And one area that first and foremost is safety, right? Mainly because I think the combination of Key Lawrence, Billy Bowman could be a combination that has a ton of upside. I think that could be a very sneaky good combination, and I can't wait to see what it looks like. I mean, also, I told you I'm in Denton, Texas. Billy Bowman from Denton Ryan. Those guys from Denton Ryan, I must say I am a little bit biased towards because I get access to watch them play all the time, right? And not only that, they're fantastic football players. I mean, you look at that Denton Ryan team, they can beat anybody in the nation at any given point. I mean, look, I'm not saying they'd beat Mater Dei. I'm saying that they are a very good football team. I'll leave it at that. But the other area I'm so keyed in on is this defensive front, right, as a whole. The reason is because not that I don't believe there's not an abundance of talent there. I think that the thing that is so interesting for me is who the coaches are there. whenever you have Chavis and Todd Bates, plus what you have to replenish after you lost what you lost last season. So those are the areas on the defense I'm most keyed in on. And what a great way to start it then against a UTEP where you can kind of figure things out on the fly. So long as you play your game, you're going to come away victorious from the UTEP game, right? It's just about playing your game. Let's change pace though. Let's go offense because there is so much talk about the defense and deservedly so, but Jeff Lebby comes to town. Talk to me what you're so excited to see out of this offense in particular.
Dillon Gabriel. The excitement is around Dillon Gabriel. 8,000 yards passing in his career in his 3 seasons as basically a starter. Him reuniting with Jeff Lebby. Fans, you guys are hearing this by everybody. Everybody's saying the same thing over and over. I'm not the only person in the country saying this. Everyone's excited about seeing Dillon Gabriel out there with Lebby again since his freshman year and seeing what numbers they put up. Seeing what these wide receivers can do with Dillon Gabriel throwing the ball. Because think about it. He threw 3,600 yards at UCF. I honestly went back to look at some of those wide receivers he was throwing to.
He hasn't played with anybody at that level.
Not seeing any world beaters. Not bad, but not seeing any world beaters. With the talent he's got now, Theo Weiss, the size that's out here. From Theo Weiss at 6'3", Jaden Gibson, the freshman, second in the depth chart at 6'5". You've got Jaleel Farouk at 6'1", J.J. Hester at 6'4", Nick Anderson, a freshman, 6'4". You've got big, fast dudes that Dillon's going to be able to launch it to. And if they play their cards right, he can throw for over 4,500 yards. Now, that's what I'm excited about. What I'm keyed in on, I want to see what this running back situation looks like. I know that the offensive line is going to be good. They won the Joe Moore Award a couple years back. Offensive lineman Beatonbow knows what he's doing. He's going to bring in good offensive linemen. This is the first year that we didn't really have like the large stable of running backs ready like we normally do. No Kennedy Brooks this year, going back to Samaje and Joe Mixon. You usually always have a stable of someone coming in that you're prepared for. Marcus Major didn't really have a year last year. And Eric Gray, to me, and we talked about this in pre-production, that a lot of people are down on him. Now, me personally, I'm not down on Eric Gray. My other team, my SEC team, is Tennessee. So I love the fact that he came from Tennessee to Oklahoma. Warmed my heart. It's like, yeah, he stayed in my family. But I feel like he's more of a change of pace guy. I don't think he's a feature back. And I'm curious to how Lebby's going to leverage him. I really feel like he's going to be brought in, moved around a lot, and then Marcus Major be the main guy. But then you brought in Tyree Walker as a transfer. And honestly, watching him in spring ball, he reminds me of Quentin Griffin. And I'm going to keep saying it over and over. A bowling ball that bounces around but can get past. He breaks tackles and get past people. The legs keep moving. They're little because he's 5'9", but he's 217 pounds and he's rock solid. I'm amped to see what he does. And then, of course, the freshman, Javonte Barnes. I'm guessing that DeMarco was higher on Barnes than he was Gavin Sawchuk. I love Gavin, but the disadvantage that Gavin had in this situation is literally Javonte Barnes is a carbon copy of DeMarco Murray. Same school in Las Vegas, same size, same build. They're the same dude. So, of course, all coaches are cocky enough to feel like if I find somebody that reminds me of me, they're going to be great like I was. So I feel like that's why Javonte probably did get the nod. No shade to Javonte. I'm very high on him too. I was actually higher on him than Sawchuk. But that's the thing that I'm keyed in the most on because I'm truly curious to see what by game 4 or game 5, who really is that feature running back.
Yeah, and I think one of the things, in my opinion, when I look at Eric Gray, I just think that he wasn't utilized the most effectively last season. And I'm certainly not claiming to be an X's and O's genius, but whenever I watched him, it wasn't how I had it in my mind, how he'd be utilized. I thought he'd be much more involved in the pass game because he is going to hurt a lot of teams there in that aspect of the offense this year. I bet a lot of money on it. Something I talked about not long ago. You want to talk about usage and all that. Interesting stat is under Jeff Lebby, Jerrion Ealy with Ole Miss had as many receptions as a running back out the backfield as Marvin Mims had all of last year. So we're talking about a guy and Jeff Lebby who he's going to get the wide receivers the ball. He's going to throw the ball to the running backs out the backfield on called plays. He's going to scheme the running backs to get open in layering concepts, right? Have the wide receivers take someone that running back slips in right behind him. Things are going to be pretty cool. And I just think Eric Gray is really good in that aspect. Now, outside of that, it's a bit more depth this year and a lot more positive depth because of a Tawi Walker, because of a Javonte Barnes. Marcus Major is a bit more sure. We've covered a lot from the wide receivers and everything, but now I want to kind of get something else in your take. If I was to ask you what concerns you had, not necessarily for UTEP, right? Because like we said, if y'all go out there, play your game, you should be able to beat UTEP. What concerns do you have, though, that you're really hoping will be answered during UTEP?
The running backs. Knowing that we're going to use them a lot. Now, I know that Levy's system is built to use them a lot. And that honestly has been the only concern I've truly had on this team. The offensive line looked like it's cohesive. Now, we do have the Wanya Morris situation. I'm not sure if you saw that announcement recently. He's basically gone for 2 games, suspended for 2 games because of academics. I guess not going to class or something. Wanya, another Tennessee transfer. Come on, bro. You got to not do that to me. But adding Tyler Guyton, who I was really high on that transferred from TCU, and putting him at that right tackle, he's now protecting Dylan Gabriel's blind side. That's also a concern for me. And it's not that I don't think Guyton can do it. I just haven't seen it. Like, that was the one thing in his scouting report was that he was considered raw, considered a talent that can become something. They don't know if it'll be a defensive dude or offensive dude. Heck, he scored a touchdown at TCU. Yeah. He has everything you want. He's big, tall, and he's a lot thinner than he looks like in his weight. Like, he weighs in at 320. He does not look 6'7", 320.
Great feet.
You look at him, you're like, right, exactly. But he's still raw. And so the question is going to be, how does he perform in his first really big, and I wouldn't say UTEP's really that big, but how he performs in that game tells me a lot. But I want to see how he's going to perform and in those running backs. What we're going to do in this running back as a committee setup. Or is Eric Gray going to be that feature back and prove me wrong? I would love for him to prove me wrong on that. I would warm my heart even more if he goes out there and he rushes for over 1,500 yards. Do it, bro. I'm there for it. But that's probably the one thing I'm really worried about is what our running back's going to look like, because we don't have a guy like Kennedy Brooks anymore.
Yeah, that's super interesting to hear that as a point of emphasis. And I can certainly understand it, especially after the season you had. It's one of those situations where, yeah, on paper, the problem looks to be fixed, but let's see how it all comes together. Mm-hmm. I think that right now, I don't know that I have concern necessarily for much on the offense. I have questions, right? And those are 2 different things. Being concerned and questioning, right? Questioning is when you're like, okay, theoretically, I can see this working out. I just haven't seen it, right? Much like your example with Tyler Guyton. You don't have concerns about Tyler Guyton. You just haven't seen him do it in an Oklahoma uniform yet. You have all the reason to believe he can be successful. We just need to see it. So that's about where I am, right? I don't know that I have a concern offensively, and defensively, I can't even say in full confidence I have it as a concern. I'm interested in the defensive front. The reason I can't call it a concern is because who the coaches are, and you do have talent that you carry over from last year, and especially a guy like Ethan Downs, right? Like, you hear how much he's getting talked about, right? Like, you hear how some of these players keep getting talked about. And what maybe 4 months ago, if you would have asked me what's your concern for Oklahoma, it may have been, okay, well, they lost some really talented guys along that front. And a Nick Benito, they lost some dudes. Now it's just simply, I want to see how they replace it. I'm not concerned about how they're going to replace it. I'm just super curious as to how it looks. So I can't wait for Oklahoma's season opener. It's a opener I think is probably more anticipated than any season opener for the Oklahoma Sooners we've seen in quite some time. Do you think that's fair?
That's very fair. I think it's probably the most anticipated one since 2016, was that 16, 17 when Lincoln Riley first got there. Everybody was wanting to see what's going to be new with Lincoln in comparison to the Bob Stoops regime, even though Bob was very great at letting his staff do their job. I think that's the thing I love the most about Brent Venables coming in as head coach as well. He's going to be all in on the defense with Ty Bates, the guys he's worked with before, Chavez. He's worked with him because Chavez was, if I'm correct, like an assistant at Clemson as well. And then Ted Roof running the linebackers. He's worked with just about everybody but Jay Valai, and he knew Jay Valai from the recruiting trail. He's going to do their thing on the defense, and he's going to tell Levy to figure that thing out on offense with DeMarco Murray and staff. I love that's the Nick Saban formula to me. Saban focuses on defense. He just makes sure that the offense is dotting their T's and crossing their T's and dotting their I's. He's making sure that they're buttoned up. Besides that, do your job. That was how Lane Kiffin was able to revolutionize the offense and move it into the new modern era that it's in today. Saban knows where he's great at and he knows where he's not. I'm gonna step back. You do your job. Just make sure you're buttoned up. Don't do anything stupid. In which, of course, that's why Lane Kiffin ended up getting kicked out before his job was up, because it's Lane. The Lane train always does stuff, and so that's what I love that. That's why I love why Brent Venables came in, and that's why this truly is one of the most anticipated games, because now we get to see the next era of Oklahoma football. Because, as you said, this is a job that no one typically leaves because they just want to go somewhere else. You know, the Lincoln Riley leave was a shocker for a lot of people because nationwide. Talking Heads even said it. You don't traditionally leave a job like Oklahoma to go somewhere else. At the same time, Urban Meyer left Florida to go to Ohio State, mainly because, you know, the things that was in the background. So that was the one thing I did anticipate. I was like, are we going to get some sanctions? Is there going to be some issues that we didn't know brewing before he left? And
good point.
Luckily, he didn't leave in scandal like that. He didn't. He just wanted something different, and I applaud him. And to be honest, I think he left Oklahoma in a better situation because,
especially for the move to the SEC.
Right, because at a certain point, you kind of do something different. And with that, let me talk about that really quick. I think that fascinates me, that the fear of going to the SEC or not talking to Lincoln Riley about the SEC was one of the reasons why he kind of was wanting to leave. And I saw a report about the money that came in to programs. I think it was like at like Banking Rate site, and they had a article about who brought in the most money. It was like the 2019-2020 season was the last data they had in. Oklahoma brought in over $101 million in football-related revenue that year. They were number one in the country. I would have never expected that in any way, shape, or form, that Oklahoma was going to outdo the likes of Alabama, Texas A&M, USC. You know, they were up there. And you would think that with that type of money, Riley would go and get a whole bunch of assistants. He didn't. Yeah. He didn't add a whole bunch of analysts. He didn't add a whole bunch of eyeballs to help with things. That's what the Sabans of the world did. That's what Dabo does, and that's what Venables about here. Looking at that staff of almost 100 people, you're like, dang, that's a lot of people. But it gives you more perspective to what's going on. And to be honest, that's the one thing you need if you want to be successful in this league, is a whole bunch of different thoughts. We talked about it pre-production. We think differently. I'm similar to you. I think differently on stuff. You need that if you want to be successful, because this game, there's so many people that are thinking differently. You've got to battle. It's a chess match. And if you're not prepared for it with enough people to kind of say, you might not want to look at it this way, look at it this way, and tell me if you see a difference. BV's one of those guys. He's like, you know what? I see what you mean.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Jay, this has been a ton of fun. Before I let you out of here, one more time, where can the people find you?
Yeah, you can find me at Unfair Sports. Talk OU football, college football, and sports in general over at YouTube. And then the podcast comes out. We'll be back to twice a week once the season starts. And you can find that wherever podcasts are downloaded and listen to. So hit me up on Twitter at Unfair Sports. Find me. We love to chop it up. Just want to talk sports. I love to argue. It's a Todd. Thank you, man, for having me on. I appreciate it. OU fans, he promised you he was going to do this. Here you go.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I had to do it. Can't wait for all the collabs to come. But with that being said, we'll see you.